Good morning. This is English 7, excuse me, for Thursday, March the 26th. Today we're going to start by going over your homework from last night. You had to diagram your sentences. Hopefully you analyzed them before you try to diagram them. Okay, that's the way this needs to be done. Let's look at number 4. Many newspapers wrote stories about Livingstone's travels because Europeans were very much interested in his exploration. Well, first, let's find our prepositional phrases. They were about Livingstone's travels and in his exploration. So you should have put parentheses around those. Now, you should have put a bracket around your dependent clause. Your dependent clause is going to be because Europeans were very much interested in his explorations. Remember, these are going to start with a subordinating conjunction. So let's look at it. We said in our independent clause, our verb was wrote. Who wrote? Newspapers. Newspapers wrote what? Newspapers wrote stories. So stories is the direct object, okay? What kind of stories did they write about? They wrote about the Livingstone's travels. That was our prepositional phrase telling us what kind of stories. So it's an adjective phrase. About is our preposition, travels is the object, and Livingstone is the adjective describing. Okay, it's our modifier. Now, our dependent clause in that sentence was Europeans were very much interested in his explorations. Okay, so were is the verb, Europeans are the subject. Europeans were interested. Interested describes the Europeans. Were is a linking verb, so I know that interested is a predicate adjective. That's why my line is slanted. Now, how interested? They were much interested, okay? To what extent were they interested? Very much. So very is an adverb describing the adverb much, which describes our predicate adjective, okay? In his explorations is a prepositional phrase. In his explorations tells us about interested in explorations and his explorations being our object. Look at number 5. Number 5 says, soon many Europeans went to Africa for wealth, although others became missionaries to the African people. First, let's find our prepositional phrases. You find to Africa and for wealth and to the African people. Now, what is the dependent clause? Remember, a dependent clause is going to begin with a subordinating conjunction. It's going to contain a subject and a verb, but not a complete thought, okay? So, although others became missionaries to the African people is our dependent clause. You should have put brackets around that, okay? Now, looking outside the dependent clause at our independent, this is the sentence that can stand by itself. Soon, many Europeans went to Africa for wealth. And let's look at how we diagrammed it. We said that went is our verb. Europeans is the subject. Europeans went. Who and what? We don't have a complement, okay? But we do have some adjectives and adverbs. So we have many Europeans. Many is an adjective telling us how many Europeans, okay? Went where? They went to Africa. So to Africa is our propositional phrase that's serving as an adverb, so we call it an adverb phrase. We have our preposition and then our object. Went, why? They went for wealth. So that is also an adverb phrase, putting for, which is our preposition on the slanted line, wealth on the object. Now, went when? They went soon. Soon is an adverb. I almost skipped it. Soon also goes under went. Now let's look at our dependent clause. Our dependent clause, others became missionaries to the African people. Became is our verb. Others is the subject. Others became what? they became missionaries. So missionaries is our complement. However, we have a linking verb, so this complement is a predicate nominative. So it's renames. So we slant it. We say others equals missionaries. Yes, it does. Okay, next. To the African people describes the missionaries. What kind of missionaries were they? They were missionaries to the African people. So to is our preposition. People is the object. The and Africa are adjectives describing the people. How do I connect? How do I connect our dependent and our independent clause? We connect them with a dotted line from the verb of the dependent clause to whatever it describes in our independent clause. Normally that is going to be, at this stage, it's going to be our verb for us, okay? So we're going to connect the two verbs, and on that line, we have to put our subordinate conjunction. In this case, it is the word although. I can barely write the word although in there. It's pretty tight, okay? I did fail on number 4 to tell you that the word was because. That is the conjunction that goes on your dotted line, okay? Look at number 6. Number 6 says, because explorers discovered gold, diamonds, and ivory in Africa, many nations established colonies there. Okay, again, let's find our prepositional phrases. We have the prepositional phrase in Africa. That's it. So let's look for our dependent clause. Look for your subordinating conjunction. In this case, that conjunction is because. So the clause is, because explorers discovered gold, diamonds, and ivory in Africa. Put brackets around that if you did not already in your book, okay? Now, how did you diagram it? Well, you said nations established. Established being our verb. Who or what established? Nations established. Nations established. Established is an action verb. So nations established what? They established colonies. Colonies is our direct object. That is why our line is straight up and down. Now, how many nations? Many nations. Many is a adjective because it's describing a noun or a pronoun. It's an adjective, okay? Here we have there. They established them where? There. So it describes our verb. Now, let's look at our dependent clause, okay? Explorers discovered gold, diamonds, and ivory in Africa, okay? Discovered is the verb. Explorers is the subject. Explorers discovered what? They discovered gold, diamonds, and ivory. Since discovered is an action verb, our complement, gold, diamonds, and ivory, is a direct object. But there's 3 of them. So I have to make it on a rocket. I hope you can see my rocket, okay? So I have gold, diamond, and ivory. And it's a little messy here, but we have a dotted line connecting them. And on that dotted line is the word and. Now, I still have the prepositional phrase in Africa. In Africa tells me where. Where did they discover these? In Africa. So we're going to have a slanted line for our preposition and a straight line going across for our object. In this case, that is Africa. Okay, we're going to connect our independent and our dependent clause. We're going to draw a dotted line from our verb in the dependent clause to the verb in the independent clause. And on that dotted line, we have to put our subordinating conjunction. If you look at number 6, what's the subordinating conjunction? It's the word because. So on this line, we're going to write the word because. Because is what connects my independent and my dependent clauses. Look at number 7. Number 7 says, after World War II ended, many of these colonies became independent nations. Okay, so first, let's look for our prepositional phrases, okay? Of these colonies, okay? In this case, the word after is going to be a subordinating conjunction. It's going to introduce our clause. So after World War II ended is our dependent clause. Put brackets around that if you did not last night. Now, let's look at your diagram. Who or what, our verb is became. Who or what became? Many became. Became is a linking verb, so we're going to put a slanted line for our complement. We're going to say many equals what? Many equals nations. So that nations is a predicate nominative. And I know these are things that we've talked about many, many times for many, many weeks. Okay? How, and many, what kind of these colonies? Of is our preposition, colonies is our object, these is the adjective. What kind of nations? They were independent nations. Now, look at your dependent clause. Your dependent clause, your verb is ended, and your subject is World War II. Because of space, I did not write mine out. I abbreviated it, okay? What is the subordinating conjunction that's going to connect our independent and our dependent clause? Hopefully you said it is the word after. After. Okay? All right. Now, I hope you did well on that last night. If you have questions, please make sure you email me or you text me with them. Let's look at page 177. Page 177. I want you to look at the board. I'm going to see if I can move this over a little bit so you can see it better. Okay? We talked last chapter about adjective clauses. An adjective has to tell us which one, what kind, how much, how many, or whose. And it has to describe a noun or a pronoun. Remember, a noun is a person, place, or thing, and a pronoun is a word that takes the place of a noun, such as he, it, they, we, okay? Now, adjective clauses begin with a relative pronoun. Okay, say that with me. Adjective clauses begin with a relative pronoun. And relative pronouns, what are they? Just as a sense of review. Who, whom, which, whose, that. These are our relative pronouns, and they introduce an adjective clause. Now, we talked the other day, a couple of days ago, about adverb clauses. Adverb clauses are introduced by a subordinating conjunction. Their list is a little longer. After, although, as if, as much as long as soon as, because, before, if, in order that, since, so that, than, though, unless, until, when, whenever, whether, and while. These are our subordinating conjunctions. Now, just like prepositions, there's a big long list of prepositions that we memorized earlier in the year. Those prepositions are all prepositions. Some of them are used more than others. And you're going to see the same thing among our subordinating conjunctions. Some are just more frequently used in our language, though all of them are subordinating conjunctions. Let's read the list one more time. After, although, as if, as much as long as soon as, because, before, if, in order that, since, so that, than, though, unless, until, when, whenever, whether, and while. Okay? These are our subordinating conjunctions. Each time we find a clause, it's going to have a subject and a verb, but it's not going to express a complete thought. So here's what I'm looking for. I'm going to look for a relative pronoun or a subordinating conjunction. I'm going to then look for the subject and verb that make a group of words called a clause, doesn't have a complete thought to it. Let's look at number 1 on page 177. The lady who lives across the street is my aunt. Okay, do you see the clause? Who lives across the street? They tell you to circle. I don't mind if you circle, or we usually put brackets, so if you want to put brackets, that's fine. Who lives across the street? Well, first, what's the first word of that clause? Who. Is who a relative pronoun, or is it a subordinating conjunction? It is a relative pronoun. Okay, since it's a relative pronoun, I know, ding, 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 that it's probably going to be a adjective clause. What does who lives across the street describe? Describes the lady. Which lady? The lady across the street. So above where you've circled your clause, write ADJ for adjective. Then draw a nice neat is the key word in this sentence. Neat arrow, Emmanuel. All right, draw a nice neat arrow to the word lady. Look at number 2. Although everything seemed calm, we were actually in the eye of a hurricane. Okay, what's the clause? Although everything seemed calm. Circle that for me. What does although everything seemed calm? It tells me when we were, okay? All right, so it's going to describe the word where. Or were, I'm sorry, not where, were. Number 3, Mitchell is the last contestant who will give a speech. What's the clause? Who will give a speech? Who is a relative pronoun. And so this clause is an adjective clause. And this adjective clause describes the word contestant. These are the definitions that we should learn. What is your clause? That we should learn. The word that is a relative pronoun. And so what does that we should learn describe? It describes definitions. So it's an adjective clause describing the definitions. The teacher, when we had received homework, resumed his lecture. The clause, when he had received the homework. When tells us it is a what? Okay, when is on our, that's right, our subordinating conjunction list. When is going to begin an adverb clause. And when he had received the homework describes resumed. When did he resume? When he had received the homework. Okay, look at the next one. Number 6. The nation expressed deep sorrow when President Lincoln died. What's the clause? When President Lincoln died. What does it begin with? A subordinating conjunction. So it is a what kind of clause? It's going to be an adjective clause describing expressed. When did they express? Okay. Number 7. Here is the book that I bought you. What is the clause? That I bought you. The word that is a relative pronoun. So this clause is going to be an adjective clause. What does it describe? It describes book. Which book? The book that I bought you. Arthur was the only one that could pull the sword from the stone. This is referring to King Arthur. If you've not read that, it's a really good book. What's the clause? That could pull the sword from the book. Okay, what does the word that is a relative pronoun, telling me that my clause is an adjective describing one. Well done. Although Abraham loved Isaac, he was willing to sacrifice his son. Although Abraham loved Isaac is our clause, and it describes was. And I'm sorry, I say this, it's an adverb clause. Look at number 10. Andrew Jackson is the president whom we studied today. Whom we studied today is our adjective clause. We know it's an adjective because it began with a relative pronoun. And it describes the word president. Well done. I hope this made a lot of sense to you. All you're looking for, clauses are going to begin, if it begins with a relative pronoun, which are who, whom, which, whose, and that. These are going to start our adjective clauses. These are our subordinating conjunctions, and they are going to introduce an adverb clause. Remember, adjectives describe a noun or a pronoun. Doesn't matter if it's a single adjective, if it's an adjective phrase, if it's an adjective clause. If it has the word adjective, it's going to describe a noun or a pronoun. If it's an adverb clause, it's going to describe the verb, an adjective, or another adverb. Tonight for homework, you're going to do exercise B. Exercise B on page 177. I want you to draw a box around the clause. And then in the blank, I want you to tell me, is that an adjective clause or is that an adverb clause? Let's do number one. Whenever the cloud moved, the Israelite nation moved. What's the clause? Whenever the cloud moved. Put a box around that. What kind of clause is this? Whenever tells me when. And we know that whenever is a what? It is a subordinating conjunction. So this is an adverb clause. Okay, describing moved. Number two, Thomas went to bed early because he did not feel well. Okay, my clause is because he did not feel well. Because is a subordinate conjunction, and it tells me why. Why did he go to bed? Why he went to bed. So it is a adverb. Number three, Isaac Newton is the scientist whom we discussed in class. Whom we discussed in class is my clause. Whom is a relative pronoun. So we know that this is an adjective clause describing scientist. All right, tonight you're going to do 4 through 13 as your homework. On page 177, we will check them tomorrow. Please make sure that you're keeping up. There is a short quiz about phrases after this. Have a good day. I miss you.